Every week, the Payne family cuts straight to the real financial story.
The one question, Bob, everyone's asking is, are we in an artificial intelligence bubble? You've been through boom and bust. What do you think?
No hype, no myths. Just what actually matters to your money.
Does feel very similar to what we experienced in the 90s. Where are we, though? Are we in 1995, 1997, 1999?
Listen to the Pain Points of Wealth on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
With many mysteries all around us, we come on the air with another episode of the Dr. Sky Experience, where, here on Talk Radio 77 WABC, the powerhouse of radio, as we like to call this episode, Theater of the Mind, with tonight's adventure posing a serious question to everyone out there. And the question is climate science hijacked by incomplete data? And how is all this going to affect you and your finances in 2026 and beyond? Following last night's adventure on the Dr. Sky Experience about the problematic subject of technocracy taking over. Happy New Year once again to all of you out there, ladies and gentlemen, whether you're in the 173 countries, all 50 states, and of course, beaming this powerful signal out, I'm sure, deep into the cosmos. The contact number, as always, get in early on the conversation for the 2-hour show. That number, 1-800-848-9222. That's 1-800-848-9222. And I'd like to thank our helmsman, Kevin, for navigating the signal of 77 WABC so it's heard as good as you would expect, ladies and gentlemen, as we move rapidly into a brand new year. What about tonight's subject? We've had special guests here on this particular radio show. We welcome others on the whole concept of what's happening in the world of climate science. But one of the regulars, as you tell us from the emails we receive, is Tom Harris. Who's he? The executive director of the International Climate Science Coalition. A little background on his organization. The International Climate Science Coalition is a nonprofit and nonpartisan group of independent scientists, economists, and energy and policy experts formed back in 2008 to promote better understanding of climate science and policy worldwide. His organization aims to help and create an environment in which more rational, open discussion about climate issues emerges, thereby moving the debate away from the implementation of costly and ineffectual climate control measures. The organization encourages vulnerable peoples to adapt to climate variability and continuing scientific research into the causes and impacts of climate change. Tom Harris is with us, and his website is simply this, icsc-canada.com, icsc-canada.com. Hearty welcome, Tom, and a Happy New Year to you and to all of our friends up in Canada, where I understand the temperature right there in your environment near Ottawa, Canada, is what? 3 degrees Fahrenheit, a cold and deep winter taking place. Good morning.
Yeah. Hi. Nice talking to you. Actually, it's warmed up a bit. It was about 10 degrees colder yesterday. So wow. Today I got out skiing, which, at this temperature, it's not bad.
It's interesting. Well, here in Phoenix, Arizona, a balmy 58 degrees right now. And when we do later the sky information, because that's what you folks tell us out there in Radio Land, you always appreciate hearing what you can see is the main mantra of the show. Talks about the subjects of astronomy, space, aviation, weather, celebrity guests, and stories of American exceptionalism. It's interesting, Tom, to talk about this. And we're getting news that the Boston Globe has a headline. I don't know if you've seen it or the listeners might be able to check it out. Why is it so cold in New England? And various theories are coming about that. But to kind of give a quick answer to this and your participation in it, we know here in the desert Southwest, we've had the highest temperatures here in the month of December. Many people are envious of the 75 and 80 degrees we've had. That's not a December or a Christmas like I've experienced. And of course, bitterly cold temperatures because of what, Tom? As you could explain, I'm sure even better, a shifting of this thing called a polar vortex. But so-called, is it really affiliated with climate change, as some may speculate? Your theory on that?
Well, no. I mean, it moves. It's actually a vortex around the poles, which is very cold air, and at times it dips much further south. And in particular, in 2021, it dipped all the way down into the central U.S. and eventually Texas became colder than Alaska, if you can believe that. And that's when, of course, they had 700 people die because they had a major blackout. So the polar vortex is certainly way beyond our control, but it happens, and it's a natural event. I just wanted to point out one thing really quick. You started out by talking about astronomy. Right now, the moon is beautiful with Jupiter literally right beside it. So
you are absolutely right, my friend, and let's not miss that, because wherever it's dark, ladies and gentlemen, with this powerful signal, it goes all over the world, but in darkness, you're right, we're experiencing, as you have alluded to, and correctly, the vestiges of this beautiful full super wolf moon. And yes, as I'm looking at it here out my window right now, and to be out with the telescope later, Jupiter and the moon are in what we call an interesting conjunction. So you're right, Tom. Thank you for adding that to the show. It's beautiful.
Yeah, that's right. And we're going to be sending a spacecraft to one of Jupiter's moons, Europa, which, of course, is covered with pack ice. And the speculation is that there might be life under the pack ice.
That's right. The Europa Clipper is on its way. And hopefully, many people have said, Tom, I know you know this, the audience may not, it's not going to land and bore into the surface of Europa, but this one is going to be a couple of passes. And people say to me, well, Dr. Sky, why is that not going to descend? Because here's the problem. And I think, Tom, with your engineering background and science background, the oppressive radiation that's around that satellite and Io, that's not too compatible for even spacecraft to survive for long. We have to build a much more resilient radiation-hardened spacecraft. What do you say?
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's a very lethal environment, to say the least. And, it's interesting. There's a science fiction written about a spacecraft that was hard enough to land on Europa and to actually have a submarine go under the ice cap. It was called The Sea and the Sky. And I believe it's Arthur C. Clarke, I'm not sure. But regardless, it talks about exploring an ocean under the ice cap on Europa. It's a very exciting story. I won't give away what happens, because very, very unexpected what they actually find.
Well, that's amazing. And kudos to Arthur C. Clarke. And also, ladies and gentlemen, shifting gears a little bit, we're kind of reminiscing about a lot of things here, but we'll jump right into the main portion, the main mantra of the show this morning, as we talk about what's happening in the world of climate change, or, as some people might describe, the planetary global warming concept. But this is very interesting, and we also noticed the passage of another phenomenal science fiction writer. I think his birthday was January 2, and that is the great Isaac Asimov, who, of course, many people in the New York area, myself included, when I was just a younger person, I actually picked up the white pages, Tom, from the New York, about 18 inches thick, right, and looked up A. Asimov, and sure enough, it was there. And my little fingers did the rotary dial. I guess that was a long time ago. And guess who answered? Isaac Asimov. How about that?
Wow, you're lucky you that you actually spoke to him.
I did, but at that time I was so overwhelmed with the ooh and the ah that I actually should have grabbed a reel-to-reel tape recorder, but I was so poor, I didn't have one. So we think about it, Tom, like last night. I don't know if you were listening, but the listeners, of course, we had another great guest on talking about the the dark side of technocracy, and not to be all negative in the new year, but it's so interesting because one of his particular books that he had written, or stories, is I, Robot, and that is so fascinating about what robots are not supposed to do, and without stealing the thunder, they're not supposed to harm you, right? That's one of the rules.
Yeah. Among the hundreds of books that he wrote, and I read many of them, one is called A Biographical Encyclopedia of Science. And it goes right back to the very first scientist in history, Imhotep, I think his name was Imhotep. Yeah, it was an Egyptian, and he was apparently the very first scientist. Anyway, the interesting thing is he has little entries, anything from 300 to 1,000 words, for 1,000 scientists. And it's amazing because you pick it up and you find out interesting things like Max Planck, born on my birthday, actually stood up to Hitler. And he stood up to Hitler and said, and it was very dangerous for him to do this. Of course, he said, stop hurting my Jewish colleagues, because they're leading scientists that are going to actually help Germany. And both of Max Planck's sons were killed. One in World War I. The second one was in a plot against Hitler, got captured, and was executed. So Max Planck, a very interesting fellow, when the war was over, he was like a national hero because he stood up to Hitler. And probably the only reason he wasn't killed was because he was so famous.
Totally amazing stories, Tom. But again, ladies and gentlemen, who do we have here as we do this particular adventure? Tonight's adventure in what we call theater of the mind, to think out of the box, because If this were television, it'd be done pretty much the same, but radio, God bless it, its existence here and the power of AM radio, or however you're listening to us and the technology today. Tom Harris, he's here with us. Who is he? The Executive Director of the International Climate Science Coalition, talking about these issues that are going on right now. You spent your whole lifetime pretty much in this field, but you're a writer, and many of these articles that we'll get into is from an organization that you write with or for, America Out Loud. Tell us about some of the things you do there and about the subject of climate change, or what might many people think is global warming.
Yeah, exactly. Well, AmericaOutloud.news is the website, actually, and they're an outstanding website. I mean, there's so much stuff to read there. You could spend your whole day, every day, reading fabulous articles on America Out Loud, and I'm lucky that they actually have given me the right to write an article once a week and to have a radio show there, too. We have a radio show, myself and my co-host, Todd Royal, who's an energy expert from Texas, called The Other Side of the Story. And the whole point of the program is to look at issues from the other side, because so often media don't tell you about the other side on issues like COVID or climate or immigration or even Venezuela. We only hear the side that's against Trump. But regardless, we bring in experts. And I'm trying to bring in an expert, for example, this coming week, Dr. Joseph Hickey, who wrote this article showing that all of Canada's warming, which is supposed to be the poster child for the world, may be fake. So, yeah, people should go to AmericaOutloud.news, and my articles are there, and also our radio show.
You know, I want to make it very clear. This is fascinating, Tom. You know, and in this subject, it's such a hot subject, okay? It's like talking politics and religion, and obviously there's two sides, and maybe three sides to every story. I just want to make it very clear here that you've stated this many, many times, and I think you should say it in better words than myself, about listening to people who don't agree with us. Go on that particular theme for a minute, because not everybody's going to like what we're saying here. And through education and opening our minds, please continue, because we want to be open about this as long as it's a civil conversation, right?
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, that's the reason that I'm a climate realist, is because I originally was a climate alarmist, and I wrote some things in a local newspaper, which one of the scientists here at Carleton University, I won't say his name because, you know, these scientists get in trouble when they're responsible for converting somebody to climate realism. Anyway, he invited me to his lab, and he showed me, look, you know, the geologic record does not support the climate scare. There's no correlation between carbon dioxide and temperature. So without being able to listen to alternative points of view, I would be still a climate alarmist. And so I think that it's really important to listen, because you learn a lot. For one thing, you find out the weaknesses in your own argument, but also it's a civilized way to behave, because, you know, nobody knows the truth about science. It's opinions based on the observational evidence and your theories. And if you don't have an open mind to changing points of view, well, then we're stuck in the past.
Absolutely, Tom. You say it so well. Let's do a little diversion here to go out to the radio station here and the many callers that are calling in various subjects. Since we brought up astronomy, let's welcome to the conversation of Theater of the Mind, Rich in New Jersey. Good morning. Happy New Year. You have a question about what? The temperature in space, and how can you survive?
Hi, Dr. Sky. New York Times, it says facts of interest on page A3, whatever. The temperature in space is a frigid minus 455 degrees Fahrenheit.
Absolute zero, or close to it, right?
Now, how do those astronauts work with those suits on? I go out to get the paper in the morning. If I'm not bundled up enough on a Sunday morning, I run back in the house. You know what I'm saying?
I hear you, my friend. Well, it's interesting. Rich, it's interesting.
How do they operate with their gloves? And I don't know.
Well, you have to ask a company, and I'm sure they'd be happy to talk with you. Tom, you may know about this. Hamilton Standard was a company. I think they still do manufacture some of the spacesuits. But again, I'm not a person who's built those, Rich, but I can just tell you, the temperature, which call absolute zeros, like 459 dot, whatever that number is, forget, I don't have the exact decimal, but it means that nothing in the universe can be colder. So how do they survive? I mean, those suits are so incredibly layered. They're so puncture-proof, at least from, well, maybe micrometeoroids. But the oxygen supply in there, the things puff up like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Person. Okay. I mean, these are $1 million suits. They're heated. They have liquefaction running through them like the Apollo astronauts when they went to the moon. If you look at those suits, when they got into them, Rich, they weighed, if they were going to stand there on Earth, they weighed over 350 pounds. So they're well protected. But Tom, You have probably, with an engineering background, you may want to respond to Rich, too, on this. Your take.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. It's not just the cold, Rich. It's also the heat. I mean, if they're directly in the sunlight, it's extremely hot. And so on the moon, for example, they would be in a shadow at minus 460 degrees, and they step out and they're at, plus 200 or something. So, excuse me, it's quite a challenge designing these spacesuits. And as Dr. Sky pointed out, they're worth millions of bucks each.
Absolutely, Rich. No, that's a good question. I mean, we don't normally get a question like that because most people think, well, we don't really know the temperature out there, but you read correctly. I don't know. What's the coldest temperature you've ever been in, Rich? I mean, what? Minus maybe 20 degrees? Who knows? What's the coldest you've ever been in? And you know how brutal that was, like you described going out to get the paper. Pretty cold, huh?
Geez, and I was like, what are we doing out here with damn shingles on a roof?
Hey, as long as we're not in space, we can... you wouldn't get the paper in space, but there you go. Hey, Rich, you got another question or comment before we move on? And I appreciate you. Go ahead.
Can you get an Earth scientist that can describe the mechanisms of the round Earth spinning on a globe and how everything works somehow?
You mean like how the whole thing does rotate?
The Earth curves.
Right.
Light doesn't bend.
Mm-hmm.
So if you shoot a laser, it's going to go out in space eventually, right?
Eventually, right. Until it reaches a point where it has no more energy to go.
The surface of the Earth. A lighthout, how far does that beam travel out into the sea?
I don't know. Maybe Tom knows. It's maybe miles, we'd say, not hundreds of miles. What do you say, Tom?
I'd say maybe 20 miles, something like that. It's...
Yeah. We don't have any lighthouses in Arizona here.
But how can a ship further out? He's eventually going to see the light. Okay,
That's
is it
right.
further?
Well, they want to see it in time that they don't hit the ocean, hit the shore. I mean, the purpose of lighthouses, of course, is to save them from crashing into the rocks. So they don't need to see it 100 miles out. If they see it 20 miles away,
how does water curve on a globe? How does it stick to the Earth? I mean, it's round, but water reaches its own level, right? How does it?
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we're going to get into this, Rich, with many people that believe that we're doomed with ocean rising, and we're not saying that they're wrong. It's just that maybe there's incomplete science in this whole thing. But let me end off on this with you, Rich. When you look at the globe, the problematic thing with the Earth is if you look at its diameter, the Earth is a marathon diameter larger at the equator than it is at the poles. It's 7,927 miles. Marathon's 26 miles and change. So the Earth is oblate, they call it. So it's wider. And the reason I'm mentioning that, as it's spinning, all that centrifugal force, that's not one of the only reasons why water stays here. Gravitation pulls down everything. But the point of the matter is the Earth is oblate. And the last time, not to be funny, man, that I got on the scale, I noticed that I was a little more oblate around my equator, but I won't ask the audience about that.
Well, it's just an increase in the gravitational field. It's not a weight change.
See? Hey, I appreciate this. This is awesome, Rich. We appreciate you. I love these questions. I think that's great. So you have a good new year, and I hope you'll stay with us throughout the year. We got a lot of exciting things planned. Thanks for being with us, Rich. Appreciate that.
Hey, Dr. Sky, I just learned something interesting about space that I think you'd get a kick out of. Did you know that the International Space Station falls 100 meters a day? And that's why they have to shoot up spacecraft to keep pushing it back up.
Yes.
Keep it, make it go faster so it'll go in a higher orbit. Sure. And it's really quite wonderful. Until just a few days ago, we were relying on the Russians to do that with their Soyuz spacecraft, to get up there, give it a little push, several times a year. That was orbital maintenance. We now have the Dragon spacecraft from SpaceX that can do it even more effectively.
You better believe it.
That was amazing. Imagine
it is
100
amazing.
meters drop.
We get all those questions all the time because everything in space is slowly decaying in orbit. Ask Elon Musk. He's got a lot of Starlinks that come out of orbit. I mean, some are intentional because they're useful lifetime, whatever it is. I don't know their exact, duration. But the problem is, you're right, that this big space station, the Mir had the issue. They use Soyuz retros to push the thing back up. But the bigger issue out there, folks out there in Radio Land, is that we have all this micrometeor stuff, and even more problematic, right, Tom, is space junk. Now, that's the big one.
Nuts and bolts. I mean, imagine a nut going 17,000 miles an hour in the opposite direction to you.
It's amazing.
That'll rip apart your spacesuit in no time.
Somebody smarter than myself said that they're estimated from the science side, in aeronautics and astrophysics, whatever, that there's probably 10 million pieces of space debris the size of at least 1 millimeter in size. Now, people may go, well, 1 millimeter, that's, look how tiny that is. Well, traveling at that speed, and it's also proven on the Tiangong space station, the reason that they had to use the other spacecraft, the Chinese, to come down is allegedly what, Tom? A tiny micrometeor had hit the glass on one of the visible windows. So they didn't want to come down through the heat when they're coming through the atmosphere, when you literally see this ion, big flame around you. It's not even a flame. That whole thing could have blown the window out, as that same thing happened to a shuttle mission, too. So that's fascinating.
Well, that's right. When they came back from shuttle missions, invariably they had pieces of the windshield completely knocked out because of
amazing
junk,
1-800-848-9222, ladies and gentlemen, as we continue with what we call the Dr. Sky Experience, Theater of the Mind. Great people that we just had. Obviously, you as ladies and gentlemen, our guests, and you, the callers. The main subject is we're going to get into with Tom Harris. Who's he? If you're just joining us, Executive Director of the International Climate Science Coalition. He has so much to say. And let's begin a little bit more with the particular article that's entitled How a Flawed Study Shaped Global Finance. I mean, that's a deep topic and a very heady one for early in the morning. But please begin. We got about 3 minutes before the big heartbreak.
Yeah, for sure. There's a group called the Network for Greening the Financial System. That's a consortium of central banks across the world, including like the Bank of England, the European Central Bank, Bank of China. And they took a scientific paper from what's called the Potsdam Institute in Germany, and they used it in what's called the Climate Scenario Toolkit. And you see, what happens is since 2021, banks are required to do a climate stress test. In other words, if disastrous climate change happens, what's it going to do to the bank? I mean, what's it going to do to their physical infrastructure? What's it going to do to the loans that they've put out? So they actually have to do a stress test. And so they have to use what's called a damage function. In other words, what's likely to happen if there's certain temperature changes. And it turns out the paper that this Greening the Financial System used from the Potsdam Institute is totally flawed. There's a major mistake in it. There isn't time, I guess, before the break to explain the mistake. But the bottom line is that using this particular scientific paper in their climate scenario toolkit was forced on the banks by the different establishments that run the financial institutions in Canada and Europe and various parts of the world. And it turns out that this has forced them to charge higher interest rates, for fossil fuel companies to perhaps have, preferential lending to develop alternative energy, things like that.
Yes,
and
right.
just recently, Nature, the scientific journal Nature, realized that there were major mistakes in this Potsdam Institute report. So the Greening the Financial System people who were forcing it on banks were using totally wrong data. And this is a major impact. It's quite an interesting story.
Well, it's interesting as we opened up the program, and if people are just joining us, what I'm going to repeat, I don't like to repeat too much here, but as we do this particular adventure, as we call Theater of the Mind, the question that I pose to the audience, still very valid for the next hour and a half, is climate science hijacked by incomplete data, and how is all this going to affect your finances in 2026 and beyond? This is a serious concern to many people, and I know it'll hopefully light up the phone lines when we talk about the problematic thing, as you know, Tom, the increase in electric rates all over the country, if not around the world, but particularly here in America and Canada, I'm sure, for various reasons that we'll begin to talk about. And again, your participation is so much very important here to me and to our special guest, 1-800-848-9222. As we will hopefully get each and every one of you on the air. But all we ask is that we have a dialogue, right, Tom? This is what we like. And we prefer that dialogue in the form of critical thinking, and not to make it too detailed here. We just want to wish each and every one of you the happiest and healthiest and most successful 2026. We'll be right back here on the Dr. Sky Experience. Our special guest, Tom Harris, the Executive Director of the International Climate Science Coalition. He has lots to say, and I'm sure you do. We will be right back.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dr. Sky Experience.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
A foolish faith in authority is the worst enemy of truth. Wisdom from the late, great Albert Einstein. As we continue, ladies and gentlemen, with the Dr. Sky Experience at 33 minutes after the hour, we welcome back our special guest, Tom Harris, Executive Director, the International Climate Science Coalition, and you, ladies and gentlemen, with your questions and comments. Let's go to the callers, Tom, as you're lighting up the phone lines, as I would expect. Let's say good morning to Max in Manhattan. Max, good morning. Happy New Year to you. How you doing?
Good morning, Dr. Sky, and thank you for taking my call.
Always.
When you mentioned the questioning that we should have, or implied the questioning that we should have around climate change, there was some years back where you had someone by the name of Michael Malin, I believe, and there was another individual. One was at East Anglia University, and the other one was at the University of Virginia.
Okay.
And they were involved with this climate science, and for some reason their emails were subpoenaed. And once they were subpoenaed, they found out that these two, who were knowledgeable about climate science, were involved with the inventing of the facade, the fakeness of climate science. And from what I understand, this was the source of it. This is where it all came out about it being a fraud.
Yeah, and you said those emails were what? They were what was the word you used? They were like confiscated.
Yeah.
What did they do?
Subpoenaed before.
Subpoenaed. Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Well, Tom, you're the expert on this subject matter, I'm sure, and please continue. This is fascinating what Max is bringing up here. I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, he's bringing up ClimateGate. ClimateGate, of course, they heard the internal emails of what the scientists were saying, and one of the things they were saying is, look, we've got to hide the decline because temperatures are going down, and of course that didn't match the narrative. You might see that there's actually on YouTube a funny song, Hide the Decline, and it's all about that. When they found out what the scientists were actually saying, oh my God, it's a disaster that we can't. How are we going to tell people it's getting colder? It's not supposed to get colder, so they had to hide the decline somehow by playing with the data. And this is what's happening in all sorts of places. I mean, the Potsdam Institute that we were talking about, another study that we'll probably get onto later, where all of Canada's warming may have been just a fake, that what happens is that when the data supports the politically correct narrative, nobody double checks it. It's just put out, and oh my God, look at the disaster. It's only when you disagree with the narrative that they do proper editing and proper peer review and everything else. So now we've got to get back to these original papers. Were they right or wrong? Because in many cases they weren't properly reviewed.
Max, interesting, don't you think? This is incredible hearing this. Did we lose Max?
Yes, no, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. You got an opportunity. See, a lot of people say to me, a lot of times nobody gets to reply back. So in this particular show, we like everybody to at least have a chance to come back and say their piece. Go ahead. Thank
you very much for allowing good conversation. I think we also might want to look at all of these underground, these below-sea structures, like the ones in Santorini, the ones off the coast of Cuba, the ones at Bimini Road, and it looks like there was some sort of civilization meters below the water at one time.
Correct.
So when we have this sort of flooding that exists, or that comes about at one time, burying these pyramids like Yonaguni Pyramid, I don't think, from what we look at, that they had cars and airplanes at that time. So no. we'd have to question ourselves what created climate change at that point in time.
Well, not to be funny, we should ask Noah, because obviously, supposedly the remains of the Ark are somewhere on Mount Ararat in Turkey. But you bring up something interesting, Max. So this is phenomenal, Tom. Was it maybe volcanism that caused these floods in the past, or who knows? What happened to rise or bury these ancient civilizations, as Max is asking about, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, we have to recognize that about 8,000 years ago, sea level was rising 10 times faster than today. And the reason was, of course, there was a lot more ice to melt. We were coming out of the glacial period. And so, especially in areas like around the Black Sea, they find actual towns and settlements under the water that were totally submerged by this very rapid sea level rise, including in that inland sea, the Black Sea, because of all the ice that was melting. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's all sorts of things that we're going to discover that were, submerged by this very rapid sea level rise.
That's amazing. Max, that's phenomenal stuff here that we hear. Great guest, as we always, go ahead and conjure up and put on the air here. So I thank you for being part of the show, and Happy New Year to you as we move forward. Thank you so much. Interesting. I want to get into these discussions in depth here. I have a whole litany of things that we've done research with you for this particular show. But from that one particular article, How a Flawed Study Shaped Global Finance, that's pretty deep stuff. But again, the main tenet of that, so the audience hears it again, is what? Data that's incorrect, as you're saying. I mean, that's the basic bottom line of that particular article, no doubt, right?
Well, exactly. And, this particular study done from the Potsdam Institute, they projected a 62% loss in world GDP by 2100. Okay, a massive, massive loss. But it was based on flawed data. You see, what they do is they look at what's happened in different countries around the world. How does the GDP change when you have certain climate change? And one particular country, there are a few countries that were off base here, but one country, Uzbekistan, had massive GDP changes for relatively small temperature changes. And that was fed into the global network, into the global model. How much GDP change would there be for a warming of, let's say, 0.5 degree or 1 degree by 2100? And they came out with these incredible estimates, 62% loss in GDP. Now, you sort of say, well, how could a small country like Uzbekistan influence the global average for GDP change because of temperature change? And here's an example that explains why one country, if the data is way off base, why one country can affect the global average. The example I use is, let's say you're taking a average weight of all the people in your family, and one person's 120 pounds, one person's 160, another's 180, another's 200, and the fifth person is 750 pounds. Now, of course, that's not possible, but let's say you accepted those 5 numbers. You'd get an average of something like 280 pounds, because that one outlier is so far from reality that it pulls the whole average up. And that's what happened in Uzbekistan. That data was so far off, it affected the whole global average. And one thing they're supposed to do is they're supposed to do something called spatial resolution, where they actually compare nearby countries to see if one is like way out of whack with all the rest, because they're all experiencing similar climate change. So you'd think that their GDP change would be similar too. They didn't do that. And so as a consequence, this crazy data in the case of Uzbekistan went into the global average, and they ended up with this outrageous 62% loss in GDP. And that paper was forced on the banks. The banks had to use that paper. Yeah. So in fact, now nature has realized that, there's a mistake here, and they withdrawn it. But sadly, the damage was done, and a lot of banks used those numbers, 62% loss in GDP. They use that for their stress tests. And so all sorts of people are paying more than they should be for their interest rates, et cetera.
But not to put our shows and you and I on a pedestal by any means. It's just that where do you hear this kind of information? Because if you turn on mainstream, legacy media, you hear everything that is, if you don't question this stuff, you're going to simply believe it. And again, as I said last night, and I repeat again, if you don't know what rights you have, how do you know what rights you lost? That's a deep subject. But before we go to the next break, here's one that I want to ask you. So everybody out there that's listening around the nation and the world can hear this question very clearly. What kind of consensus is there in your mind, studying this so long, Tom, from people who are anti this whole climate concept and that are the pro side that say, it is this global warming and climate change, with both sides? And I don't necessarily like the middle of the aisle, term. What do both sides have a consensus on? Is there anything that comes and pops into your mind that the audience can hear?
Yeah, the only consensus is that we should reduce real pollution, and we should conserve energy and conserve energy, and look after the environment in ways that we know that we have an impact. But if you actually look at what opinion do the scientists have, to me it's a little bit like a bell curve, where you have very few scientists on each extreme. Very few scientists say it's going to be a catastrophe, and very few scientists say there's no impact of greenhouse gases. Mostly it's in the middle, where the scientists say, this is a very uncertain field, and it appears that the impact of CO2 is not very significant because since 1880, CO2 has gone up 50%, which everybody says, oh my God, that's terrible. But the change in temperature is only just over 1 degree. So most scientists who are well informed, they actually say, yeah, there's some impact. You know, they might be down around the 20% level,
yes.
But the likelihood that it's catastrophic, you just don't hear that from scientists.
Interesting. You know, we're coming up on the next break here in just a moment, and I just want to remind the audience, 1-800-848-9222. Plenty of time for you to get in on this, I think, always fascinating conversation with great guests. And I say this sincerely. If you have requests out there, we know we had a few in last night's program, not to guarantee that we'll get them all. Just email me, drsky@wabcradio.com. And why do I say that? Because the interesting information that you're telling us you hear here, we continue to try to provide you with whatever the term balanced is. We try to give as much information out there. And what are our subjects? What are the areas of interest? Astronomy, space, aviation, weather, celebrity guests. We've got tons of those planned for 2026. And also stories of American exceptionalism. If you're wondering why do I talk about that, why not? Because the main mantra of this station, as you hear proudly, and I support it 1,000,000%, truth, justice in the American way, common sense thinking. And that's why we ask when people call, we have a dialogue with critical thinking. And we do appreciate you, ladies and gentlemen, at 1-800-848-9222. We'll be right back. And we'll continue here on our journey in Theater of the Mind with tonight's adventure with Tom Harris. We'll be right back.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dr. Sky Experience.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Science without religion is lame, but religion without science is blind. Another great quote from the great master, Albert Einstein. As we continue, ladies and gentlemen, let's continue with the callers with our special guest, Tom Harris, who is the Executive Director of the International Climate Science Coalition. Let's say good morning to Alexei in Queens, an alumni. Alexei of the Dr. Sky Experience, how are you this morning? And thanks for your patience.
Yes, good morning, Dr. Sky, and to your guest. Let me say this much. This thing of climate change, this is the greatest hoax ever perpetrated on humanity since snake oil salesman.
Okay.
This is a grand con job. Yeah, it is a grand con job perpetrated by these teenagers who grew up in the 1970s, who had left-wing parents who frightened them to death with all these ideas of the end of the world, and now they are taking over. So what they do is they petition governments, banks, financial institutions to front them billions of dollars every year based upon distorted information, as you just said before, with Uzbekistan. So what happens here is that the world is oh my God, we're going to have 15-foot rise of oceans and this and that, polar bears to die. Look, the atmosphere and the weather and climate of the Earth is a self-regulating machine, a gigantic planet-sized machine that knows what it is doing. It is not stupid. It follows.
And as other people have said, Alexei, Mother Earth has this incredible healing power, not an excuse to dump mercury, lead poisoning, and all kinds of things, and throwing trash and polluting.
The problem is, the problem is that the human race happens to be in the way. And we are very unpredictable, whereas the weather system is reasonably predictable.
Well, let's have you and Tom have this conversation. I'll stay out of it for a moment because, Alexei, like I said, you're an alumni of the show. And boy, you hit it right there, right, Tom? You hit the spot.
Oh, yeah, exactly. You know, Dr. Patrick Michaels, who was at University of Virginia, was a climatologist. He passed away just recently. He said that the old idea of the fragile Earth, you know, on the knife edge, on the verge of falling off, he said it's wrong. He said the Earth is robust. Just like you said, Alexei, the Earth has the ability to self-heal. And if it weren't the case, if it weren't true that the Earth could absorb a lot of punishment, so to speak, and always come back, then what would have happened in the past when far more serious things happened, you know, like massive asteroid impacts and volcanoes and all the different things that happened early in Earth's history. You know, so, I mean, the Earth is a very intelligent system, I guess you could say. It actually is able to absorb a lot of things without actually going to catastrophe. I mean, if CO2 was such this great threat, then when carbon dioxide was 10 times higher than today, I don't mean like the 50% rise since 1880, I mean 1,000% of today's level. That happened in the past. The Earth didn't go into a runaway Venus-type hellscape. I mean, the Earth recovered. The Earth was fine. In fact, that's when we had most of the plants that actually evolved on our planet, and that's why they pumped CO2 into greenhouses. So I agree with you completely. There's no reason to purposely pollute the Earth, but at the same time, the whole idea that it's this fragile system just on the edge of collapse, that's just ridiculous.
Alexei, you get the final word as we give all of our guests and callers, I should say. Go ahead, please.
It is that the Earth is a very rugged structure, the surface as well as the weather system. The surface has tolerated things which the massive 8-point the Richter scale earthquakes, Krakatoa exploding. You have Pompeii with the volcanoes. You have so many things, but the Earth is made to last. It's durable and must necessarily follow physical law. The physical law simply dictates that the entire thing has to persist. That's why it was created. It's created to persist. And these minor things with the climate and such, these are frivolous follies that make the governments give money and the banks and so forth to people whose loyalty is compromised because they are all members of the left, the political left.
Well, Alexei, in closing, I want to mention one thing here. You brought up Krakatoa, and on the trivia file, here's something interesting maybe most people don't know. I don't know who knows, but this is what I read. Read the book a long time ago and had a guess. The loudest explosion in decibels ever heard, they didn't have a measuring instrument there, but based on all the atmospheric pressure, was about 315 decibels. Now think about that. Oof. Allegedly, a ship that was 40 or 50 miles away, that had blown the eardrums of people that far away. But can you imagine the sound reverberated around the Earth? But again, going to Alexei's point, and of course more so with Tom, with the experience he has, the Earth is resilient and it rebounds, but never again to go out and just say, well, what the hell, let's go and pollute. Alexei, thank you for being with us, part of the Alexei alumni of the Dr. Sky Experience. We appreciate you, Alexei. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night, sir.
Good night.
It's amazing. So isn't that amazing, Tom? That supposedly, I mean, that's not some guy just made it up in his garage. That's incredible.
I have the book. Yeah,
315 decibels. Can you imagine, like jet engines or what? You're the jet engine guy. What, 120?
Yeah, exactly.
140?
Yeah, that's right. And the loudest rock concert in history, I think, was like 120 or something. It was The Who. Wow. So, yeah, this is incredibly loud.
I might argue with you on that in a friendly way. We were asked to sit with Ted Nugent. You hear his little promo that he did. And he asked us to sit right in the front when we did a television interview with him. And honestly, between the wafting when marijuana was not as available as it is today, I was inundated with that, my clothes, and I was just as high as a kite, not because I smoked it, but even worse, not to be a funny guy. The sound from that concert, I honestly couldn't hear good for about 3 days, and I didn't put those little earplugs in, but boy, Uncle Ted really rocked the house. That was incredible.
Yeah, it's amazing. And, some of the frequencies are below audible, and they still hit you. Really hard.
I can't hear you. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, yeah.
What?
I mean, that's why wind turbines are such a problem. They produce this low-frequency sound you don't hear, but it penetrates the building and rattles your bones. I mean, it's not healthy.
Interesting. So let's go and talk. Let everybody know again your website. I hope I have it right. ICSC-Canada.com. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, I just want to make sure that they're good. And tell us again, before the clock runs out here, you do your own podcast and show. How do people get in touch with you on that? Because I'm sure you have a lot of followers from this and the many, different interviews we've done with you on the Dr. Sky Experience.
Yeah, for sure. It's at AmericaOutloud.news, and you click on the radio shows, and ours is called The Other Side of the Story. The most recent interview that we did, which will be broadcast again tomorrow evening at 8 p.m. Eastern time, 7 p.m. Eastern time, is from a specialist he's a physicist. He's looked at the education system in America, and he's showing that they have actually gotten rid of the scientific method in science education in K through 12, if you can believe that. It's amazing. They're so woke. They're so woke. They're going against all the scientific tradition of Einstein and Newton and Madame Curie. And it's an interesting show. People tune in tomorrow at 7 o'clock on AmericaOutloud.news.
No, that's very interesting, Tom. I mean, talking about this whole subject, like we said at the very beginning of hour number one, the question we posed to the audience is climate science hijacked by incomplete data? And I think the majority of people that have so far called in will take calls from people who disagree. But of course, here we go. How is this going to affect your finances in 2026 and beyond? But let's talk for a moment. We only have a few minutes before the top of the hour. This whole issue, and particularly the listeners in the New York metro area, the base and home of this powerful radio station, we were hearing, that is, during the gubernatorial election in New Jersey, the big issue there was about electric rates. So, I mean, all this stuff is going on. Is it attributable, in your opinion, to the things that are going on in the green, in the green economy? Or maybe that's not even related to it. But the big concern is, the cost of electricity everywhere. What's going on with that?
Yeah, exactly. Well, because of the effort to stop climate change, they're stopping using the most powerful and reliable and least expensive energy sources, which of course is coal, natural gas, and oil, and to some extent nuclear. And it's interesting because if you look at a graph of electricity prices in countries across the world versus the percent renewable, it's not really renewable, really the wind and solar power that they've actually incorporated, you find that places like Germany and the Netherlands that have incorporated lots and lots of wind and solar power, you can walk across Denmark, for example, you can walk from coast to coast and never lose sight of a wind turbine. Of course, they're huge. I mean, they're massively high. They're higher than the Statue of Liberty. But the fact is, those countries have by far the highest electricity rates. And you see the same thing in American states. If you look at states that have mostly coal fire and mostly, fossil fuels and some nuclear, they have the lowest rates. So yeah, there's no question. You bring in more and more wind and solar power. Not only do you get blackouts because of course the sun's not always shining and the wind isn't always blowing, but you also have much higher electricity rates. So the climate scare is a very practical concern. Not because we're causing a climate emergency, but because that belief in an emergency is making us turn off our most valuable and least expensive energy sources.
Interesting, Tom. Hour number one, ladies and gentlemen, goes into the history books here. When we continue with hour number two, we'll continue with Tom Harris, of course, in your questions and comments. Either way, whichever way, we just ask that it's done with dialogue and try to, pose it in critical thinking concepts. That's an interesting one. 1-800-848-9222. And what I'd like to do is, in beginning of the hour number two, let's talk about the Dunning-Kruger effect. And I think people may get a little bit of a laugh out of what this is, or maybe they'll look at it and say, hey, I never heard that before, and it's kind of interesting. Much more here on the Dr. Sky Experience, where proudly on this powerhouse radio station, Talk Radio 77. WABC. We'll be right back.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Hour number two, as we call it, Theater of the Mind, with tonight's adventure, posing the question to our listeners. Is climate science hijacked by incomplete data? And how is all this going to affect your finances in 2026 and beyond? Who's our guest? Tom Harris, the Executive Director of the International Climate Science Coalition. And your questions and comments, ladies and gentlemen, at 1-800-848-9222. Welcome back, Tom. We have a full board of callers here, so let's consider their patience. They've been waiting. Let's say good morning to Clyde in the great state of Texas. Clyde, good morning. How are you? And Happy New Year if you're with us.
How you doing? I think that the climate thing is hoax. I remember when I was in high school in the 70s, they were talking about pollution, and they fixed all that up. Now they got AI, and AI is nothing but demonic forces.
Interesting. Wow. Tom, we opened up hour number two here. Your response to Clyde, powerful stuff. from the great state, or should I say, the Republic of Texas.
Yeah, well, you have to realize that all of the AIs that we use, Copilot, Genesis, all the different AIs, they're all programmed on the West Coast of the United States. So they obviously have a very strong left-wing bias. And you can see that when you ask it about climate change. If you contest it, it's really quite funny to dig into the AI. And you ask it a question, it'll give you the politically correct answer. But if you actually know something about it, you can dig a little deeper and say, well, what about this? What about that? And eventually it says, I'm not prepared to discuss this any further. because like it'll say, for example, that there's extreme weather increasing all over the United States. And I'll say, oh, that's funny. Look at this database, which shows that last year there was not a single record set on a statewide level for extreme weather, whereas 1936 there were 27 records set, and they all stand today. And it'll argue with you for a while until eventually you say, well, show me a particular state that had an extreme weather record in 2024.
Censorship AI, because by the man behind the curtain or the woman behind the curtain. Who knows? That's pretty wild.
Yeah.
Clyde.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it's heavily programmed to give the answers they want you to hear.
Wow. Clyde, you get the last word if you're with us. Thanks for calling. Please continue.
Well, the only thing I wanted to say is I don't remember anything that climate change they proved was correct. Nothing.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's right. All the ice was supposed to be gone in the summer, according to Al Gore and his quoting of particular science papers, which he misquoted, by the way. And, of course, there were millions of square kilometers of ice in that year. And what was it, 2013? I think it was supposed to all be gone, but it's not.
Yeah, it's interesting. Thank you, Clyde. Hey, Happy New Year to you down there in the Republic of Texas. I love Texas. Okay, let's go to line number 4 and welcome Nick in Virginia. He wants to talk about what's happening in the status of the ozone layer. Thanks for your patience. Good morning.
Well, thank you, Dr. Sky, and I enjoyed this conversation. I have a question about the ozone, and that is, first off, did the banning of the underarm deodorants and with fluorocarbons, I believe it was, that caused some of the destruction of it. Was that a hoax or was that a true phenomenon? And did it actually help cure the ozone level?
Yeah, I'm not an expert in that particular area, but I worked with Dr. Tim Ball, who was an expert in that area. He's passed away, unfortunately. And he maintained that the ozone hole changes. It's not really a hole. It's just an area where there's less ozone. It's thinner. But he maintained that it was part of a natural cycle and that we hadn't really identified it yet because we'd had satellites that were measuring the thickness of ozone for only a few decades. So, I mean, we wouldn't even see if it was a natural cycle at this point. And it is interesting that the ozone layer has largely recovered, indicating that perhaps it was a cycle and maybe the chlorofluorocarbons didn't actually affect it the way they were supposed to. But Dr. Ball, he actually appeared before a Commons Committee, a Senate committee as well, in Canada, in our Parliament, and they attacked him viciously because he disagreed with the idea that we were destroying the ozone layer. He was saying, no, it's just a natural cycle. And so I don't know the answer to your question. I suspect that chlorofluorocarbons actually contributed, but they weren't causing a crisis. I suspect that they weren't causing a crisis. So I think it's very much like the climate scare. Yeah, CO2 contributes to warming, but it's certainly not a crisis.
Well, Nick, you bring up some very interesting points. You're so right. We hardly hear anything. I remember Time magazine way back when they had this big thing about the depletion of the ozone layer over Antarctica. But just to let everybody know out there, what is ozone? It's triatomic oxygen. It's O3. And it's different. And how is it normally created? I mean, if you think about it, Tom, help me on this. I would imagine that the propensity of thunderstorms, and I think Nick would be interested to hear this is created through also lightning strikes. So you have a propensity of ozone creation through nature. But, Nick, you get the last word on this, but it's a very interesting thing you brought up about ozone. I haven't heard about it in a long time.
Well, I don't have anything more about that, but I want to say you were talking about renewable energy. I think we have a great renewable energy that no one's talking about, and that is wood power. And burning wood is carbon neutral, and forest fires don't pollute like we think they do because it's carbon neutral. So I think, I live in a town, and we have a council that wanted to ban burning. You have to have catalytic converters on your wood stove, and you can't have one. So they're trying to push it out of a lot of places. So I think that's something that we need to promote more of and allow some of these forests to be harvested with some firewood, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
And they talked about getting rid of gas stoves and all that too. But go ahead, Tom.
Yeah.
Sorry to cut you.
Yeah, it'll help prevent the fires too, because we haven't maintained our forests properly, and so as a consequence, they're a tinderbox just waiting to expand, I should say, into major fires. And it's interesting. Before Europeans came to North America, there were huge fires in North America. Fires that would burn an area as big as the whole of Nevada or Oklahoma. And the only thing that would stop them was the Rocky Mountains or the Mississippi River, that sort of thing. But those kinds of fires were called crown fires. They would rip through the countryside, burn off the trees, but they wouldn't kill the trees because they wouldn't burn down into the roots. But what it would do is it would clear all the underbrush. So for a long time afterwards, the forest was not susceptible to fires. But because the environmentalists told us, it's not natural to clean out the underbrush, it just builds up. And so the fires, when they do occur, are much worse. They call them now base fires. They burn right down into the roots and they kill the trees. And this is caused because of governments yielding to environmentalists. The bottom line is that fire was the way that nature used to clean the underbrush. We can't let it just go wild now because we have cities. But exactly. we have to maintain the forest the way the fires used to.
Nick, appreciate you with the ozone question. I haven't, not to be repetitive, I haven't talked about ozone or heard about it in eons. So thank you so much.
Yeah, can I add something to the ozone thing?
Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. It's interesting that ozone is both good and bad. At high altitude, it's a good thing because it blocks out the high intensity ultraviolet rays. But correct. At low altitude, it's a pollutant, and it's a serious pollutant. It causes, bronchial, different kinds of respiratory diseases, things like that. And we actually do put out ozone from industrial processes, which is bad at ground level. And it's interesting because, if you actually look at cities across Canada, for example, you see pollution levels are dropping in every category except ozone. So that is sometimes a serious problem that we have to address.
Nick, thanks for being there with us, and appreciate you being part of the Dr. Sky experience. Hope you'll join us in future episodes of our show. We promised the audience something, and I wanted you to jump right into it, if you'd be so kind. The Dunning-Kruger effect. I think this is fascinating, and it might put a smile on somebody's face, but yet again, who knows? It might upset somebody, too. But what is it?
Well, I'll read the title, and if you don't mind, I'd like to read the first three sentences of the abstract.
Go ahead.
It says, unskilled and unaware of it, how difficulties in recognizing one's own incompetence lead to inflated self-assessments. It's written by Dunning and Kruger back in 1999. They're psychologists who did this study, and it was published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology. Anyway, here's the first three sentences, which are quite fun. People tend to hold overly favorable views of their abilities in many social and intellectual domains. The authors suggest that this overestimation occurs in part because people who are unskilled in these domains suffer from a dual burden. Not only do these people reach erroneous conclusions and make unfortunate choices, but their incompetence robs them of the metacognitive ability to even realize it.
No, that's amazing. It's right. Kind of neutralizes arrogance. And let me mention this to the audience, and I'm not reading this. This is just something I remember from a long time ago in high school. I'm not a Shakespearean actor, but in the comedic play, As You Like It, the quote is, "The fool doth think he is wise, but the wise man knows himself to be a fool." That's an interesting one. And Socrates said it even better. I neither know nor think I know. How about that? That's like neutralizing the concept of arrogance, but I don't know. That's an interesting phenomenon, and it relates very much to what you're talking about. You fill in the blank, so I don't get attacked on this, that many in any discipline may not have all the answers, right?
Well, that's right. And they did various studies where they gave people questionnaires on things like philosophy and politics and other topics. And then after they had done the questionnaire, without telling them how well they did, they asked them to estimate how well did they do. And what they found out was the people that knew the least estimated that they did much better, something like 20% better than they actually did. And the people who knew the most underestimated their accuracy. And, you know, I find this even happens to myself. As I get older, more and more I'm saying I don't know to questions that I used to be very confident about because I've learned more and I realize there's a lot more to the story than I thought. And, you know, it's interesting because I think that as people learn more, they realize how much they don't know and they become more humble.
You bet. So in your opinion, what's the danger of what we may hear in mainstream legacy media about this whole thing as if we're being weaponized with the climate scare? And, you know, how do we, let me ask you this. How do we fight back, if that's the correct term, or how do we respond back if we're not just going to swallow this stuff? Because it seems like so many powerful individuals are pushing this. And last night we talked technocracy with Tom Wood, you know, and Patrick Wood, excuse me. And the whole subject is, it seems like all these subjects are getting way out of control. How does the average person respond to some of this and be I use the word activist in their own way?
Well, yeah, I think what they should do is demand to the media, demand to the politicians that we have these issues opened up to proper debate between scientists on different sides and that it be fully publicized. You know, the environmentalists want to keep the lid on the Pandora's box of climate change because they're afraid if we take off the lid and the public see how complicated it is, the public will have no patience with spending what is now, believe it or not, now they estimate when they do the proper investigations, they find that we are spending across the world $5 billion a day on climate change. So, I mean, they want to keep the lid firmly on the box because if it comes off and we allow open debate between scientists on two different sides or three or four different sides on the climate issue, the public are going to have no patience with that kind of expenditure.
You're ringing a bell with the number of callers here, as we would expect with such a controversial and important topic. Let's say good morning. He's been patient. Tony in Arizona. Happy New Year to you. You're on with Tom Harris.
Hey, thank you, Dr. Sky. It's always good getting on, speaking with you and Mr. Harris here on WABC. I'm going to ride on Alexi's coattails for just a little bit, if I may. Now, he's talking about the snake oil salesman drive with this. I would have to agree, but it goes a little bit deeper than that as far as who the snake oil salesman is. Well, it was a group of people that found out or that realized carbon dioxide is everywhere on this planet, you know, us being a carbon planet, by the way. Right. But you know, back in the 70s, there was a gentleman who was part of one of the commissions there in, what was it, the United Nations, okay? And this is when they were starting to have all of these, you know, the cold climate scare, you know, the planet's going to freeze and stuff like that. Well, it just so happens that this gentleman started, you know, the deal about the carbon credits, okay, and created a vehicle. It was called the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. Okay. It had these trade in carbon credits, okay. So it's, you know, these are like the people that are behind the curtain, if you will, behind this whole. It's not just the scientists. Scientists are being used to, you know, scare the people to create the crisis that doesn't really exist and how to make money off of it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's interesting. Tom,
trading.
Torch, this is interesting.
Yeah, trading so-called carbon credits, and it's not really carbon, because carbon is a solid substance, and in fact, carbon is like soot, which is amorphous carbon, which, you know, is actually comes out of some smokestacks if you don't have proper pollution control. But the whole point of the carbon credit trading is really to make a huge amount of money for the middlemen that arrange it. I mean, the bottom line is that, you know, the climate scare is largely driven by money. When you talk about $5 billion a day, I mean, there's a lot of people making a lot of money, so you're right on.
Tony, you get the last word. It's very interesting. You bring up these very, very detailed subjects. Pretty interesting. People need to hear it. Please continue.
Well, I mean, it's, you know, now it's climate change, and I agree. I mean, it's going to change. It's going to go up and down. Like Alexi said, you know, we were a very robust planet. I mean, look, all the planet has to do is hiccup and fart, just by having volcanoes and stuff like that, and it pretty much dictates the way things are going to be for all of us.
Well, that's a simple way to say it, and you said it, and you say it so well.
Yeah.
There you go. Interesting. Thank you, Tony. Appreciate your time, and thanks for being part of our show. Let's continue with the callers. The caller board is hot here. Line number 3, we go to Tony in Clifton. Tony, Clifton, New Jersey. Good morning and Happy New Year. How you doing?
Hey, hi, Dr. Sky. Hi, Tom. I wanted to say I'm so happy. Congratulations to Jared Isaacman, who's our new NASA director. All the best to you. If you're listening, we're just so excited, right? It's a good day. We're happy. I love what everybody's saying, and I have my own kind of twist on this, but I'm with you guys. I have seen so many people make so much money in the past 4 years under the last administration that I really question everything now. But not being a scientist, Dr. Sky and Tom, I go to it's like the Bible story, and I look at the flood because I go through the Bible in a year, and I was amazed today at how there was a flood, of course, God was mad and there was a flood, and they were on this ark for 1 year. I was trying to make sure I understood everything earlier today. No idea we were going to talk about it. And, of course, it was only 8, it was 8 of them, that got on, plus all these different animals and stuff. And, God had always, given man domain and dominion over the land, the animals, and everything. And, that was something that we were in charge of. It wasn't in charge of us, and what happened wasn't just random. We were in charge of it. And when they got off the ark, they just went about their business, started having children, started eating, making food, animals were reproducing, and everything was back to normal. So, that tells you that built into this beautiful creation that we have is that everything is mostly self-maintaining, and we're the ones that have dominion over it. That's my thought.
Yeah, it's sad because the environmental movement is very un-Christian. I mean, basically, they are diminishing the importance and significance of human beings as if we're just one old animal that, you can get rid of easily and help save the planet. But, I mean, this is a very sad thing because, it's interesting, Alex Epstein, he talks about the moral case for fossil fuels and that the main objective should be human flourishing, that we should be trying to encourage people all over the world to have their best possible life, not to sacrifice our lives to some sort of environmental god. I mean, the bottom line is that the environment is doing perfectly fine in most cases, so we should focus on helping people. And that's, of course, what George Carlin, the comedian, would say. He'd say, look, the earth has been through much worse than us. Like, how about focusing on helping people instead of, imagine what you could do with $5 billion a day to help the poor across the world, or especially in the United States. You could build a hospital.
You're right.
Yeah, you could build a hospital practically in every city in the whole U.S. I mean, so the climate movement is very anti-human. In their attempts to control the climate, they're prepared to let people suffer and die, like they did in Texas. Up to 700 people died, and that was largely caused by the climate issue. So, yeah, I'm very anti-climate movement, partly because they're anti-human.
Interesting. Tony, you get the last word. We're almost at the bottom of the hour, but always appreciate your participation.
Well, I think that you'll find most people, and we'll leave it at this, most people know that it's a lot of propaganda and people are making money because every day we see that people are making money off of some deal or another, and like Somalia. And, it's just very sad, and people are starting to get a little more savvy about these things, Tom. But thank you for being on tonight.
Thank you, Tony, for being with us. And you bet.
God bless you guys.
Happy New Year to you. Interesting commentary we got here. If you haven't gotten on yet with us, ladies and gentlemen, we just certainly will keep the lines open at 1-800-848-9222. We'll go after the break to John in the Catskills if he's still with us. And how about you, ladies and gentlemen? You may have a question or a comment Not necessarily do you agree with us, and certainly we don't expect that. But we always ask for that to be a dialogue, right, Tom, and to have it in some sort of a critical thinking analysis. I love that part of it because it's unfortunate when emotion takes over things. There's no good that comes out of that, right? Isn't that the simple?
Oh, yeah. You become neurotic. You don't think.
That's exactly right. No, very interesting subject matters here. And when we come back, ladies and gentlemen, I want to get into an analysis of some things that you may be experiencing here, particularly our listeners in, let's say, North America, United States, and Canada. The difference, as we'll get into with specifics, between El Nino, La Nina, and why is that whole thing now at the front, center stage? We just had an article that we talked about from the Boston Globe that was talking about simply this, the question, why has it been so cold or is so cold in the New England area? And we came up to our esteemed guest here, Tom Harris, that it's more like the shift of what? The polar vortex, if I'm correct in that assessment, right?
Yeah, that's right. I think it has a lot more to do with it than anything we're doing.
Very interesting. And again, Tom's website, if you'd like to go to it, we, of course, recommend you do this. We do that with all of our special guests. The website is icsc-canada.com, and he is experiencing 3 degrees Fahrenheit in his environs around Ottawa, Canada, and we here now have a 57-degree balmy evening here. But I'm sure, Tom, somewhere in the middle, that temperature is the division of those two numbers divided by 2, right? So hopefully,
it's warm by our standards.
And don't forget, as Tom alluded to, he actually gave us the early part of the sky report, the beauty of what's left of, still out there, the beautiful full super wolf moon, and yes, to the right of the planet Jupiter by a number of degrees, the mighty planet Jupiter now coming to what we call opposition. What's that? Its best time of the year is on the evening of January the 10th. Later after the show, I'll be out there with the telescope, as maybe many of you have during the holidays, getting a gift of a telescope, observing what Galileo saw back in January the 6th and 7th of 1610 when he went, wow, I believe that the Earth is not the center of the universe, but the sun is, because Jupiter's big and I see little things going around it. More on the Dr. Sky Experience here with our special guest, Tom Harris, as soon as we return.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dr. Sky Experience.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
The greatest enemy of knowledge is not ignorance. It's the illusion of knowledge. So said one of the greatest astrophysicists of all time, in many people's opinions, the late, great Stephen Hawking. We continue here with the Dr. Sky Experience. Tom Harris is our guest at the top of the hour. And we continue. I know we're going to get to the difference between El Nino and La Nina, but people have been waiting on the line, anxious to talk to you and ask their questions. We say good morning to John in the Catskills. Good morning, John. You want to talk about what happened to what? Acid rain, right?
Yes, I do. But before that, I am sitting comfortably inside here with the wood stove going. Tom had mentioned about wood stoves. I cook on it. I perk my coffee. I heat my water on it, besides heating myself.
There you go.
Wood stove is great. So,
of energy.
Yes. Scary names that the media has put out, the bomb, cyclone, atmospheric river, superstorm, Sandy. Now we got climate change, global warming. Before that, acid rain. New York State, back in the 80s, because there was no internet, they published pamphlets to hand out to people about acid rain even. And I remember seeing rain collectors up on the mountain, a ski center nearby. What can you tell me ever happened to acid rain?
Good question. It's not something I'm not familiar with. What do you think, Dr. Sky?
I really don't know either. I mean, when we're both honest here about this is interesting, John. But it was alleged that there was something in the stratosphere and in the clouds when the pH of that water was changed. And now, here we go. This is the only thing I can say, and I'm not guessing, but I'm kind of close to saying this is my answer. Here it is. That there was some sulfuric particulates inside that volcanic dust. And when it came down into the water, the pH, it came down as rain, the pH of that changed from regular water to something more acidic. That's about the best I would be able to say, John. And I think I'm pretty much just giving a a broad stroke of the brush on that. What say you?
The only thing I remember hearing is putting scrubbers in smokestacks for the industry, and I think they had success with that. Did that stop it, you think?
Yeah. In fact, they move the sulfate particles from the emissions. So that's probably why we're not hearing about it much now. In fact, we don't hear about it at all. So my guess is that they solved it.
Well, John, on a personal note, you're in the Catskills. My family had a home when I was just a child, and we used to visit the relatives in a town called Wardsboro, New York. Are you familiar at all with that location? I gather it's a big area of the Catskills.
Yeah, I believe that's down south from here where I'm at, yes.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yes.
Brings back lots of memories. Any closing comments or questions? You still have the time.
Yes, I do.
Go ahead.
You mentioned about the United Nations, and or that lady mentioned about religion, or Tom did, with the climate. A UN
Tony
climate,
did, yes, Tony. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a UN climate guy, I forget his name. I read about him. He has since been let go because of sexual hanky-panky, but he claimed, he was one of the top guys in the UN about climate. He claimed climate is my religion. That's what he said.
Wow.
Yes, that's how fierce it is. To me, God's in control.
Yeah, I just looked up acid rain, and it's interesting. It says here that we figured out the cause, that it was caused by sulfur dioxide, nitrous oxides from burning fossil fuels, and that we solved the problem. We solved the worst of the problem. So it shows that when real issues exist, and right here, you're right. It says power plants installed scrubbers, switched to low sulfur fuels, or shut down older coal units. So we did solve it. So we can solve problems that are real.
That's amazing. John, thank you for the question that we neither really had an answer and we had to look it up, but always honest here with everybody that calls. Thank you, John. Hope you'll be a regular caller to the Dr. Sky Experience. Let's continue because we'll get to the answers and differences between El Nino and La Nina in a moment, but we have many callers here. Let's go to line number 2 and say good morning to Paulie in Westwood. Happy New Year, Paulie. How are you?
Happy New Year, sir. I just want to say, before I ask my question, thank you, Frank Morano, for introducing me to you. And now you got your own show. Congratulations.
Well, thank you, sir, Paulie. I appreciate that. It's a high honor.
I love your show.
Thank you.
I love your show. I'm sitting in the garage. I'm so jealous of your last call that's sitting in front of a fireplace. I'm sitting in front of a little heater.
And you're using a lot of electric, I imagine. Remember,
I know.
Don't stick your finger in there because what do they say, right, Tom? It's not the voltage, it's the amperage. Be careful there, my friend. Right?
Yeah, that's right.
Well, that's nice, Paul.
You sit in front of a fireplace. But anyway, my question, why can't we use steam power on like our locomotives and stuff like that anymore?
Well, of course we do. When we burn coal, for example, in a coal-fired power, we use it to produce steam, and then we drive steam turbines with that steam. So, in fact, that's how the old locomotives worked. They weren't steam turbines, but they used coal as the source to produce steam. But the bottom line is that same thing in natural gas. When you have a natural gas-fired power station, you're using the natural gas to boil water, to make steam, to turn the turbines. And the same thing, quite frankly, with nuclear reactors. So steam is still being used. The reactors use the heat from radioactivity to actually boil water and make steam and run the turbines that turn the generators. So we're definitely using steam still in a lot of ways.
Interesting.
I'm just saying, why can't we use it like on the regular trains in metropolitan area?
That'd be awesome.
The environment at all, or?
Yeah, they've gotten away from trains running on steam power because they now have enough diesel. Diesel, of course, is the major one for trains. But, of course, in local areas, like in cities, they'll often use electricity. But, no, going back to coal-fired power stations, coal-fired, locomotives, I mean, if you have proper pollution control and you're burning good quality coal, it's a great thing to do. It's interesting. Near our home, there is a theme park for children, and they have a little locomotive that drives around and pulls the kids, for a fun ride. And it was producing no visible smoke at all. And I asked the engineer, I said, what are you using as a fuel source? And he said coal. I said, coal, I don't see any emissions at all. He said, it's anthracite coal. Okay, anthracite. That coal is now, unfortunately, quite rare, although they're now finding a lot of it in Antarctica. And it's a very shiny, it's a very shiny, hard coal, and it produces practically no pollution at all. And I think that we're going to be mining anthracite in Antarctica in the not-too-distant future because it's a wonderful source of energy and produces practically no pollution.
Well, Paulie, on the trivia file, as we move forward here, I want to say thank you again for the kind comments. But if you ever get up, folks, to Scranton and Steamtown, I'm a big fan of locomotives, and here in Arizona, it goes across the country, the Union Pacific Big Boy, one of the most powerful, massive locomotives ever. I was amazed with this 1.5 million pound steam machine. But boy, the only problem was, Paulie, it was putting out a lot of soot, though. But when that thing goes, it's just an amazing, if they could perfect, like Tom was saying, a way not to give out all this, exponential stuff that's waste product, like the smoke and steam. Well, that might be nice. But Paulie, thank you. Appreciate it, and Happy New Year to you. Thank you so much.
My wife. That sounds perfect.
Thank you so much. Check out Steamtown if you're a big fan of locomotives, because, wow, I'd like to bring them back, Tom. That'd be awesome if they could, but do it the way you said, where there's none of that black smoke coming out.
Yeah, with anthracite, and that's the big problem with China using so much coal. They use low-quality coal, so you end up with this Asian brown cloud that floats across the Pacific or, in the air, and it affects pollution levels actually on the west coast of the United States. So, yeah, coal is great if you're using high-quality coal and you're using good pollution control, but the Chinese don't do either.
Well, if you're on the line, ladies and gentlemen, we'll do our very best to get you on the air because we appreciate you and value you as part of the Dr. Sky experience. But let me just introduce this, and when we come back, you, of course, can elaborate in much more detail. El Nino, as we call it, the boy child in Spanish, what is it? A warmer Pacific Ocean current, let's say, as opposed to La Nina, which is the cooler water. These are the opposite phases of the El Nino Southern Oscillation. So many people are saying right now, in this particular time period, we're seeing more of a La Nina climate pattern for 2026, but there may be a dramatic change coming earlier this year to a more neutral phase, somewhere in the middle. So what is the difference between warm and cold? Maybe cooler water. But how does that affect our weather? I mean, we got about a minute, and if you want to elaborate now or save it till later, but please continue. That's amazing.
Yeah, normally what you have is that warm water piles up in the western Pacific around Indonesia, and cool water rises in South America, and that's called upwelling, when the water rises, and that's like the neutral phase, and that's a good thing because the upwelling from deep in the ocean on the coast of South America brings up a lot of micronutrients, phytoplankton and other things, so it's a great time to fish, for anchovies and all sorts of things. But when you get El Nino, the hot water starts coming across and it stops the upwelling, okay? And it has massive impact on our climate as well. There's all kinds of impacts that occur because of El Nino, which is the warm water building up on the Pacific coast. Right now, we're in the opposite phase where it's cool water building up there. And we're seeing, and that is actually causing very interesting cooling effects across the world. Drier conditions in part of South America, colder, snowier winters in North America. That's ongoing. That's the La Nina.
Amazing. Great information from Tom Harris. His website, again, ladies and gentlemen, as we go to the break, icsc-canada.com. A regular here, part of the Dr. Sky alumni, and we appreciate him on this radio show, the Dr. Sky Experience. More on the other side of these important announcements.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dr. Sky Experience.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
As we move back in time and space, ladies and gentlemen, more with our special guest, Tom Harris. But more important, what could be more important than that, or equally important, are the callers. Let's continue to say hello to the callers. Jerry in New Jersey on line number 1. How are you, sir? Happy New Year.
To both of you. So, what I was wondering is, I've never heard anyone speak about this, and I've known this for about 2 decades, and I've read articles many years ago about this. Enron was the largest bankruptcy in the history of the United States, or the world, I think, at that time, back around 2000. And they were an energy company, if you remember, and they were in Houston, and they sold gas derivatives. They were a gas company that decided to start selling derivatives and start playing games with accounting and so forth. And they went bankrupt, and they went to jail, a lot of those CEOs. And I don't want to name them, but I know who they are. So both of those guys lobbied Clinton and Gore in the 90s to join Kyoto and to join the carbon credit thing. And they explained to Gore particularly, this is interesting, they explained to him how he could make a massive amount of money and also donate it to the Democratic Party, which they were donating loads of money, if they could get this climate change and carbon garbage going. And these are the people who are the foundation of the worst financial energy combination and the worst bankruptcy to that time, one of the worst 5 in the history of the world, I believe. And they're the architect of carbon credits, of the real carbon credit craze. And Gore runs a $36 billion energy fund right now. I mean, not energy fund, carbon-related credit energy fund.
Yeah, follow the money, right? There you go.
Right, and he started this in 2004 when he had gone nuts from losing the election. And it's a two-punch thing. One, they want to kill oil because that's the cash cow for Republican Party donations, and they wanted to use this, and this is what the executives at Enron sold them on, that you could fund so many Democratic things and you could make money all over the world with these carbon credits and things like that. And Gore is worth 3 times what the Obamas are now, and he's worth 3 times what the Clintons are. Does anybody know that?
I have no idea, but that's amazing what you're saying, Jerry. Let Tom explain, because even though we're short on time here, you bring up some very interesting points that deserve like a whole show, Jerry.
Check it out.
On that.
Check it out. Yeah, for sure. For sure. While you were speaking, I actually looked it up, and it says that if CO2 became regulated, Enron's business model would win because they expected to have huge profits from natural gas when the coal and oil was being turned off and it was switched to natural gas. So they were also involved in emissions trading markets, renewable energy investment. And it says here, one source notes Enron, quote, supported carbon emission reductions linked to global climate change because it expected profit opportunities. So, yeah, you have to be a little suspicious when you see that a lot of the origin of parts of this is Enron.
That's amazing. Jerry, we're short on time, but no, what you bring up deserves a whole nother show. If you can make a mental note of that, or a physical note, Tom, I'd like to talk more about this, and hopefully in a future show with you, Jerry and I and yourself, we can all talk about this in greater detail. Thank you, Jerry. Happy New Year to you and your family. Let's continue. Try to get as many callers in. Dave in Connecticut, good morning. Happy New Year. You want to talk about biofuels, right? How you doing there?
Yeah, on a practical way, every time there's a storm, I live in Connecticut, and the tree cutters come in for the power lines and the homeowners who've got down trees, and there's, ice storms, thunderstorms in the summer, and they chip all the wood. And what mainly is done with it is just dumped underground as mulch, and it rapidly rots and gives back all that carbon energy as CO2 uselessly. And the environmental movement does not support combustion of any kind, and yet the carbon combusts itself when it rots and goes back to the atmosphere. All that wood is chipped expensively, and it becomes a waste problem. We need biomass plants to burn that and make electricity. And the other thing, a political problem that your guest might comment on. I get a lot of the publications by Earth Justice, Union of Concerned Scientists, and I'm looking at a bar graph, the fall 25 one. It's called Extreme Rise in Documented Attack on Science. And for the 4 years of the Biden administration, it lists 2 documented attacks on science. And the first 9 months of Trump, it lists 506. Wow. And, you think about the Biden attacks on people who wanted hydrochloroquine for COVID. That, you know what? It is so obvious, a rotten fish piece of data. How does your guest deal with the political nature of the science that we live with?
Very good question, Dave, but unfortunately you'll have to have the answer. We'll have to have it off air. Here we go. Let's continue. I just want to get as many folks in, but you bring up so many great questions here. But go ahead, Tom.
Yeah,
this is interesting.
Obviously, we should use that fuel, the wood chips. I mean, otherwise they decompose and they give all the carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere anyway. So why not burn it? I mean, that makes sense. Yeah, I agree with him completely on that. Concerning the other political issue, yeah, that's hard to understand, isn't it? I don't really have much to say on that.
That's amazing. Make a mental note or make a note yourself if you would. We'll talk about this again, the subject that Dave is bringing up here about the biofuels, and we'll have to continue that conversation. Let's say good morning to Dominic in New Jersey. Good morning, Dominic. You're on with Tom Harris. How are you doing? Happy New Year.
Hey, Dr. Sky. Good morning, Tom. Thanks for having the courage to come out here and speak about the things that, like you said, the legacy media often doesn't. But I just think as a lot of other callers, have said, I think the green movement's just a total setup. It's hard to listen to the experts who not only fly their private jets, but if they really thought the oceans were rising, they wouldn't be buying $10 million mansions right on the beach. Right. And the banks, of course, wouldn't be giving them 30-year mortgages on the sand.
And it's amazing. No, it's like we're getting needled, right, Dominic? In the proverbial sense, we're getting needled with disinformation on a lot of this stuff. You know what I'm saying? There you go.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah.
And the politicians are just like needle-nosed garfish. They got a real long mouth for talking, but absolutely no brain behind it. It's a scam. Thanks, guys.
Yeah,
That's
thank
amazing.
you. I agree.
Thank you, Dominic in New Jersey. Happy New Year to you. Let's close out the show. We have another caller here on line number 4, welcoming Jack in New Hampshire. Thanks for your patience. You're on with Tom Harris.
Hello. I know you don't have much time, but basically the fault lines that run along past Iceland and all the way up and just north of Russia all the way across the Arctic area are creating a lot of heat in the Arctic Ocean. And I don't hear that on the news, but even the oceanographic out of Woods Hole, Mass, has got all kinds of articles about 500 and somewhat areas of smokers. They're putting hot water from the magma down in the fault lines all through that whole area. In early spring, it melts much faster than any of the area in the Arctic Ocean, but it's not on the news. You can find it if you Google it. Google Arctic Ocean smokers, and there's a whole long list of areas that are putting hot water in because of the fault lines. Magma's cracking come up through.
Absolutely. That magma's hot. And what's the change? What do you think's going on, Tom? I mean, these are all great subjects. Wow, what a great bunch of callers tonight.
Yeah, and
that's amazing. Mm-hmm.
That's right, and that's one of the reasons Iceland is able to generate so much of its electricity from geothermal power. So, I mean, that's a very useful thing. Unfortunately, that's not present in most of the world, but in those areas, sure, let's use that let's make electricity using that heat source.
Interesting. Jack, thanks for the commentary here. We're taking notes because we're going to try to get more exploration with Tom in our future programs. These are great subjects. I never knew that. I mean, I understand that there's faults and fissures, earthquakes, and all the ring of fire, but that's a powerful statement you just brought to the surface. Thank you. Very interesting. Well, we have a few minutes, Tom. You get the floor. Let's close it out by talking about, in your opinion, the biggest issues right now that people need to know about. And as you describe what's going on here, we brought that question to the surface before we started the radio show. And the question was, and is climate science hijacked by incomplete data? And how's that going to affect your finances in 2026? What can you say and close out the show with some hopeful ways to fight this stuff? What do we do?
Well, the biggest thing is you have to ask, is that really so? When you hear statements from scientists about, Canada warming at twice the rate of the rest of the world and things like that, because they just found out recently, December 23rd, a report was published which actually showed that the massive increase supposedly in temperature in Canada is just an artifact, as they call it, of the data. It's just caused by changes in thermometer position or, forests growing up around the temperature sensors. And you have to realize Canada's a big area, so it has a major impact on world climate temperatures and that sort of thing. And it turned out that, in fact, it's a fake, that there's almost no temperature change in Canada over about 60 years. Mm-hmm. We haven't heard yet back from Environment Canada and the other groups that are saying Canada's warming so fast, but it'll be interesting. I think ending the year with a scientist digging into the real data and finding out what's really happening and challenging the government, because he's done that, that's a very good development. I think we're going to see a lot more of that.
Absolutely, Tom. And in the great words of the esteemed Albert Einstein, and I'm quoting him again, A foolish faith in authority is the worst enemy of truth. That's a powerful thing, too. And you may have heard some of those promos from another radio legend who was a friend of mine, Barry Farber, and many of you in the New York area knew that. He, of course, talks about always refusing to be a victim. Fight back legally and responsibly. Thank you, Tom Harris. We'll do this again, I'm sure, and appreciate you. Happy New Year to you and your family. And thanking all the staff at WABC, particularly John Katsimatidis and the entire family, and from the executive staff, Chad Lopez, and tonight, our helmsman Kevin, for making this show sound as good as it should. We'll be back next week with more information as we talk about things that are the mysteries of the universe and beyond on the Dr. Sky Experience. Have a great week.
Thanks for listening to the Dr. Sky Experience. You can hear the Dr. Sky Experience Saturday mornings, midnight to 2 a.m. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?
Listen to this podcast now
on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Leadership Thread with Dr. Peggy Polonis.
I'm Dr. Peggy Polonis. Join me on each episode where I unravel the story that shaped leaders, tracing the thread that led them where they are today. Because leadership isn't born in adulthood. And thank you once again for joining us on the Leadership Thread, education, ethics, and sustainability.
Download all of Red Apple Media's podcasts right now through your favorite podcast platform.